The applause sign flickered on. The audience roared. Stephen Colbert stepped onto the stage like he always did, with rhythm, with timing, with the confidence of a man who had built a space where laughter was control. He looked out at the crowd and smiled. Then came the intro. Tonight's guest is a former Florida Attorney General, a frequent television commentator, and someone I have disagreed with about nearly everything. Please welcome Pam Bondi. The crowd clapped, some out of curiosity, some out of habit, some with tension under their palms. Pam Bondi stepped out in black, not dramatic, not flashy, just deliberate. She didn't wave. She didn't scan the audience. She looked straight ahead. She shook Stephen's hand with a stillness that didn't match the music playing. They sat. The desk felt wider than usual. The applause faded, and the room braced. Stephen started with a smile. So Pam, can I call you Pam? Pam nodded once. You can call me what you like, as long as the questions are real. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Wow, we're skipping the warm-up act. Pam folded her hands. Some of us didn't come here for the punchline. The audience chuckled nervously. Stephen leaned forward, still smiling. I have to ask, you knew this wasn't exactly your audience tonight? Pam replied, You're not exactly mine either. He laughed. The crowd did too. But something about her tone didn't leave the room. Stephen pivoted. You've been one of the most visible defenders of policies this audience doesn't particularly love. What's it like to be the person saying the thing no one in the room wants to hear? Pam answered, calmly. It's exactly what it looks like. Except I don't come here to be liked. I come because the people who already agree with me don't need me to show up. Stephen nodded, thoughtfully. Fair. But when you do show up, you make some bold claims. About media, about partisanship, about integrity. Why should people here believe you're offering truth and not just a well-rehearsed defense? Pam didn't flinch. Because I say it whether the lights are on or not. Stephen gestured to the cameras. Well, the lights are definitely on now. Pam said. Then maybe we'll both find out what happens when they stop being a spotlight and start being a mirror. That stopped him. Not because he was stunned. Because he wasn't ready to be matched in stillness. The audience quieted. Not silenced. Just uncertain. They were used to Stephen controlling the frame. But Pam wasn't playing along. He tried again. Let's talk about January 6th. You've said things in the past that many see as minimizing what happened. Do you still stand by those words? Pam looked directly at him. I stand by the idea that no side owns the moral high ground. They just own the louder microphone. Stephen pushed, gently. So you think the mob that stormed the Capitol was what? Misguided? Pam didn't look away. I think they were dangerous. And I think your side pretends its anger isn't. That hit. The audience murmured. Stephen said. You're drawing an equivalence where many people would see a threat and a protest as two different things. Pam said, and I'm watching a room laugh at questions until someone gives them an answer that makes them squirm. No one clapped. Stephen sat back, measured. You think this audience is unfair to you? Pam responded. I think they're used to watching the other side get edited out before the joke lands. That was the moment. The shift. Where laughter stopped being safe. Where the camera didn't feel like protection. Where a guest no one expected to win stopped trying and started revealing. Pam wasn't there to change minds. She was there to hold her ground. And for the first time that night, Stephen Colbert, the man who built a fortress out of wit, realized that his best weapon was useless against someone who didn't come to be liked, laughed at, or forgiven. Stephen Colbert crossed his arms on the desk. He wasn't smiling anymore. Not out of hostility. Out of awareness. Pam Bondi wasn't here for sparring. She was here to hold a line. Even if it meant standing in silence while the audience waited for a punchline that wouldn't come. He said, You've defended a lot of people and positions that have drawn serious criticism, even condemnation. Doesn't that wear on you? Pam replied, It would, if I was looking for applause. Stephen said, Even applause can come from the wrong people. Pam didn't move. And silence can come from the right ones. Doesn't make it less true. The audience was still. They weren't angry. Just unsure. Stephen had always made them feel safe through tension. But this wasn't safety. This was clarity. And clarity doesn't always come dressed in the politics you prefer. Stephen tapped his pen once. You know what frustrates people? They feel like you defend without acknowledging pain. That when people are hurting, you point to law instead of listening to grief. Pam took a breath, then said, "Because I don't believe grief justifies distortion. I believe it demands discipline." Stephen looked at her. "You're saying emotion shouldn't change how we see the law." Pam said, "I'm saying emotion already has. And now everyone's afraid to say that out loud." A low murmur moved through the studio. Not protest, not agreement, just recognition, the kind that doesn't fit in applause. Stephen asked, "Do you care that people leave conversations with you feeling unsettled?" Pam replied, "Only if they think comfort is the point of the conversation." He pressed, more quietly now, "And if someone watching this thinks you're defending the indefensible?" Pam leaned forward. "I'm not defending anything. I'm refusing to decorate what people hate with language that makes them feel better." She paused, then added, "There's a difference between truth and tact. I wasn't raised to confuse the two." In the control room, a junior producer whispered, "Do we cut early?" The senior producer said, "If we do, we'll be proving her right." Stephen sat back. His expression changed, not defeated, not frustrated, just real. He said, "I think I wanted this to be easier." Pam didn't soften. She just said, "Then you invited the wrong woman." The studio had fallen quiet. Stephen Colbert adjusted the note card in front of him. He didn't look at it. He just needed something to hold. Pam Bondi sat with both feet flat on the floor. Her hands were still. Her shoulders didn't shift. She had said what she came to say. Stephen asked, more carefully now, "Do you ever worry that clarity without compassion hardens people?" Pam's voice didn't change. "I worry that compassion without clarity blinds them." Stephen nodded slowly, then asked, "What about accountability? You talk like the world's too soft, but some of us think it's too cruel, especially to the wrong people." Pam leaned in. "And you think I haven't seen cruelty? You think because I speak firmly, I've never stood in rooms full of grief, full of fury, full of failure." She stopped. "Let it breathe. I don't speak from comfort, Stephen. I speak from the burden of watching justice get rewritten by emotion every time someone doesn't like how it feels." The room didn't applaud. They listened, because no one expected her to sound like that. Stephen's tone changed. Not to win her over, to meet her. He said, "You talk like someone who's been burned." Pam didn't flinch. "I have. I still showed up." He looked down at his card, then back up. "And you're not afraid to get burned again?" Pam answered, "I'm not afraid to be misunderstood. I'm afraid of leaving before the room hears what I actually meant." Then she did something that changed everything. She stood up, not to leave, to look past the cameras, into the studio, and beyond it. She said, "Some of you came to laugh. Some of you came to boo. That's fine. But don't confuse disagreement with disrespect. And don't confuse truth with tone." She turned back to Stephen. "You gave me the space. I filled it. I'm done." He blinked. The audience didn't know what to do, so they didn't do anything. Pam walked off stage. No wave, no smile, just stillness. An exit. That was the moment that stunned the room. Not because she fought, but because she never raised her voice to win it. And she didn't stay to collect applause. She left it behind, on her terms. The show ran short that night. The segment never aired. Not because it was chaotic, because it didn't fit. There was no laugh line to land on, no arc to return to, just a silence so dense it became its own character. A silence Stephen Colbert couldn't talk over. The audience left confused. Some called it a misfire. Others said nothing, because deep down, they weren't sure what they had just witnessed. It wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't a walk-off. It was something rarer. A guest refusing to become a character just to survive the format. Backstage, Stephen sat in his dressing room, the door closed. No one knocked. No one asked for notes. He stared at the monitor, where the interview played back in raw feed. No cuts. No music. Just Pam Bondi, sitting perfectly still while he tried every tool he had, and none of them worked. She hadn't tried to win. She hadn't tried to charm. She had just spoken, and she hadn't blinked when the audience didn't follow her. A writer stepped in, cautiously. "You want to talk about it?" Stephen didn't look up. He said, "I think she told the truth, and I think I came looking for a version of her that didn't exist." The writer nodded. "So what do we do?" Stephen closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. We learned to ask better questions. The next week, Stephen returned to the desk. He didn't open with the usual rhythm. He didn't explain the missing segment. He said, "We brought someone on this stage who didn't play along, and we didn't quite know what to do with that. So we cut it. And that might have been the most revealing thing we did." He looked into the camera, not for a joke, for a reckoning. Pam Bondi didn't yell. She didn't storm off. She didn't insult anyone. She just refused to perform. And that unsettled us more than anything she said. He paused. Maybe that's worth sitting with. And then he went on with the show. But something had shifted, and the audience felt it. It started in small places. Clips from phone recordings in the audience. Low-res, shaky, unpolished. No laugh track. No overlays. Just Pam Bondi, sitting stone still, saying, "There's a difference between truth and tact. I wasn't raised to confuse the two." That sentence was posted on a late-night politics forum, then on a legal blog, then on an Instagram story from a college debate team in Colorado, captioned, "She didn't try to win. She just refused to blink." Pam never commented. She didn't tweet. She didn't go on other shows. She was asked, and she declined. The producers behind those invitations didn't understand. They assumed she was avoiding something. But she wasn't. She had already said it all, and she didn't need a second round to make it land. In a courtroom in Tallahassee, a junior attorney preparing for her first case replayed the clip twice on her laptop. Her mentor watched over her shoulder and asked, "You quoting Pam now?" The younger woman said, "I'm not quoting her. I'm trying to figure out how to sit like that." The older attorney smiled and said, "You'll learn. But it takes longer to stop needing people to like you than it does to speak." Stephen Colbert read the transcript 2 weeks after the segment was cut. He hadn't touched it since. But something in him knew the quiet had earned revisiting. He read the words slowly, out of order, out of rhythm, and by the end, he wrote 3 of them on a sticky note and placed it on the edge of his monitor. Don't shrink her. That became a private rule in the writer's room. Unspoken, but felt. Guests came. Some fiery, some gentle, some difficult. But Stephen stopped steering them toward safety. He stopped softening the edges. And when a guest said something too real for a joke, he let it stand. Because the room had already learned what it felt like to mistake discomfort for danger. And Pam Bondi, no matter how people felt about her, had been the one to make them feel it first. Months later, Pam Bondi was back in Florida. Not in front of cameras. Not behind a podium. Just walking through a courthouse hallway after a long morning of consultation, briefcase in hand, heels steady on tile. A young clerk, early 20s, nervous, stopped her at the elevator. "Ms. Bondi?" she asked. Pam turned, politely. The clerk hesitated, then said, "I saw what happened on Colbert. You didn't say anything flashy, but I've never seen anyone sit in that kind of room and not flinch." Pam smiled once, not wide, just enough, then said, "Not flinching is just what it looks like after enough years of knowing exactly what they expect you to do." The elevator opened. She stepped in, didn't say another word. In New York, Stephen Colbert sat in his office before a taping, thumbing through questions for that night's guest. He paused on one card, crossed out a joke, wrote something sharper in the margin, let her finish. He tucked the card back into the stack. It wasn't about Pam anymore. It was about what she'd left behind. The clarity, the refusal, the reminder that some guests don't need the crowd, the laugh, or the edit, because the most powerful thing they carry is their ability to remain whole when the room offers them a version of themselves to perform. Backstage, a producer mentioned they still had the footage. Uncut, stored, never aired. Stephen asked, "Do people still ask about it?" The producer said, "Not really, but the staff still remembers." Stephen nodded. That was enough. Some truths don't need distribution. They just need to remain undeniable to the people who saw them up close. Pam never mentioned the interview again. She didn't need to. Because when she speaks now, in court, in commentaries, in briefings, the room is different. Not friendlier, just quieter. People still disagree with her, challenge her, dissect her views. But they do it more slowly now. Because they remember what it looks like when a woman brings no apology, no excess, no need. Just presence. And when she leaves the room, no one says she changed it. They just notice it doesn't quite snap back to how it was before.